Hi guys, let's talk about Benavidez versus Zurdo today. This is a big Cinco de Mayo fight, at least as close as they could get to Cinco de Mayo weekend. I think the actual day of Cinco de Mayo is on Monday or Tuesday, but this fight is going to be on May 2nd, the same day as Inoue versus Nakatani, and this is the largest in weight fight in history between two Mexican fighters, between two Mexican champions being at cruiserweight. There's never been a heavyweight title fight between two Mexican fighters, and this is a cruiserweight title fight for Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez's cruiserweight title. But my initial impression is I don't know how long Benavidez is actually going to be in this cruiserweight division. I think Benavidez sees himself as a heavyweight champion eventually one day. The heavyweight situation is a lot more varied than it used to be, of course, with the unified era with Usyk, and now the belts starting to scatter. Benavidez obviously will have chances in the future to find himself a fight against a heavyweight champion where he can easily win a heavyweight belt like he's doing in the cruiserweight division here. And I do mean easily, because I don't necessarily see this as being as challenging of a fight or as big of a challenge for David Benavidez as some people might be saying. I know I feel similarly about Inoue versus Nakatani with Inoue, and how I don't really feel like Nakatani is as big of a challenge, but that's more of a testament to how good Inoue is. It's the same thing here. It's a testament to how good I think David Benavidez is, that I don't really think Zurdo Ramirez is that much of a challenge for him. But we saw a similar approach with how an elite fighter fights Zurdo Ramirez in the Dimitri Bivol fight, and how he is a very tempo dictating type of fighter. He's a very high ring IQ kind of guy. And he's a southpaw. He really leads with his front hand, and he really likes to, dictate where the fight is taking place and at what tempo the fight is taking place. But once he got figured out by Bivol, he didn't win a round. He didn't really have an answer to Dimitri Bivol's offense other than, firing shots to the body back the other way. And Bivol really was able to control the fight from there. And I think you're going to see something similar here with David Benavidez and his elite, hand skills, except Benavidez really puts power on every one of his shots inside of his combination punching in a way that's unique in boxing, I think, today. He just throws combinations of nothing but bombs. It's similar to like how Terence Crawford would do, where every shot really mattered and really seemed to shock his opponents. But like once Benavidez is able to hit Zurdo, there's just going to be more weight on those shots now that he's a cruiserweight. He's just going to get more dangerous. I think that like at heavyweight, there's a risk of him starting to slow down, right? Or him just starting to not train as hard also. But at cruiserweight, he's still having to train. He's still having to cut a little weight off. And he's still in his absolute prime. He's still, this is prime David Benavidez. This is the David Benavidez people are going to talk about in the future when people discuss greatest Mexican fighters and people bring up David Benavidez. This is the fighter they're going to be talking about. This is the pair of hands that they're going to be discussing. So Zurdo is going to have to really hunt for a finish early in this fight, to be honest, if he wants to have any hope. And that's kind of wild. I just don't think that's going to happen. That's not the kind of fighter he is. And I don't think that that's going to happen to David Benavidez. I think that, maybe Zurdo could like knock him down, but I think Benavidez would just get up mad type of deal. Like, I don't really think that would even affect him that bad. I'd be like, hello, welcome to the cruiserweight division. Here's a big shot from a big, cruiserweight right at the start of the fight. But I think that's actually a weakness for Zurdo in this fight. The fact that, He's best at the start of the fight, like a normal fighter. Like David Benavidez doesn't have a normal gas tank. David Benavidez isn't really that normal, right? He's like Terence Crawford, right? Like I said before, he tends to his gas tank gets revved up as the fight gets going. And then he really actually seems like his round one is round 5, right? Round 5, round 6 is when he gets started in a lot of his fights. Sometimes he just comes out white hot, but maybe against Zurdo that happens and he just wipes him out quickly. Benavidez is the guy who that would happen with, in my opinion, not Zurdo. I don't think Zurdo is going to actually get a quick KO, but that's how he's going to have to hope to win, because the basic flow of this fight goes against Zurdo. And that's kind of my main analysis of this fight, actually, is that Zurdo, like I said, is a fighter who he starts, at the best he's going to be. He starts with his most energy, and over the course of the fight, his energy goes away like a normal fighter. And Benavidez at the start of the fight, he's reading you. He's figuring out how he's going to enact his offense on you. And then once he actually, gets comfortable in the ring, feels comfortable in his own body, and gets ready to actually, attack and move forward, he does so. And from then on, it's his fight. And like, I don't know really how much Zurdo is going to be able to do once Benavidez just starts letting his hands go in this fight. And if that happens immediately, it's going to be a very, very quick night. And there is plenty of precedent in David Benavidez's career of that being the case, of him just coming out and not having to read his opponent. And I think that, there's a pretty good chance that a prime David Benavidez with more weight on, fighting a southpaw, I think a lot of times David Benavidez's solution to a tricky problem is to just go right through it. And I think you could definitely see like an aggressive start and honestly a quick finish from David Benavidez in this fight, to the point where like I think I'm probably going to even pick that. I think I'll pick David Benavidez to probably win this fight. Maybe not in the first round, but as soon as he figures it out, or immediately, right? So it could be the first round, but it could also be the fifth or the sixth round. But I think pretty quickly, once Benavidez gets it figured out, I think Zurdo is kind of done for. I think that you're going to see a more powerful version of Benavidez at cruiserweight that still has his speed and is still in his prime. And you're seeing a Zurdo who's getting a little older, who's had a lot of miles, and there's just something about the tempo of both fighters that doesn't match, right? That doesn't mix well. And also, Zurdo loves to probe with that front hand. I can compliment him and say that, Zurdo, he reminds me of he's a very tactful fighter. He reminds me of Gene Tunney. I know that's very weird, but he reminds me of like a modern Mexican southpaw kind of Gene Tunney. He's very calculated. He probes with that front hand. He likes to move in small semicircles, right? Small 90-degree like semicircles to dictate where his opponent is standing and sort of force his opponent to follow him little by little in this very conversational way that's very in fitting with what the Mexican style of boxing is, right? It's a very Mexican style of like control, tactful, high IQ control fighting. And David Benavidez just does not give a fuck. It's a bad matchup for Zurdo, right? He's not actually going to fight well against somebody who, doesn't just attack ruthlessly, but attacks intelligently. The reason I talk about Zurdo probing with that front hand and that being a big part of his game, like it's negative, is because it is a negative against David Benavidez. That probing front hand becomes a pivot to work off of for a great offensive fighter like Benavidez, and especially if you're trying to figure out, an unconventional look from a southpaw where everything's backwards. And, Zurdo has a weird, unconventional, fighting style anyway. Like many great fighters do. Benavidez is going to have to figure that out. That probing straight hand becomes all the more of, a settler for Benavidez, actually. Something that settles him down and says, okay, I know where that is. I know what that angle is. I know how to work off of that. Duck under it, throw a bomb over the top, whatever. There's endless amounts of creativity, endless amounts of combinations that can come to mind of a Benavidez when he sees that front hand poke out. So I don't necessarily think that working with that jab like Zurdo does is going to be that beneficial against a fighter like David Benavidez. And there's a pretty good chance that if there's something that Benavidez sees immediately, he's just going to go right for it. Now, I don't know what that thing might be, but I think you could see a first round KO or a first or second round KO here in this fight, and that is not a condemnation of Zurdo. I just think that, David Benavidez at cruiserweight, I actually think this is his proper weight class. That even though he sees himself at heavyweight, that he actually belongs at cruiserweight. This is actually his proper weight class where he's going to still have a lot of power and still have a lot of speed and, be facing other fighters who aren't necessarily big enough to really harm him too badly back the other way. Because like I said, the only rounds in which I think Zurdo could really do damage to Benavidez are in the early rounds, and there's a decent chance that Zurdo might know that, and that, again, that just makes the fight all the more, leaning towards Benavidez, because Zurdo will expend his gas tank in that scenario by the middle of the fight, and then Benavidez will just have, a more immobile target to aim at with his shots, and that's not the world that Zurdo wants to occupy for too long in this fight. He wants to keep moving, and I think that Benavidez is going to hurt him too badly at some point in this fight. So I think this is going to be a pretty brutal and spectacular pugilistic victory here for David Benavidez. I think this is going to be one of those fights that people look back, in David Benavidez's highlight tape at the end of his career and go, that was prime David Benavidez. That was the great Mexican fighter. That was the Mexican monster that we were all talking about. That's that legendary super middleweight light heavyweight, cruiserweight, 3-4 division eventually champion, because I definitely see David Benavidez winning this fight. Let me know what you guys think of this fight. Like and subscribe for more combat sports content, of course. Jaime Munguia is also fighting on this card. He's got a comeback fight. And Oscar Duarte is also fighting after the Richardson-Hitchens fight got canceled. And I have my whole opinion on that. I've given my opinion on that on the channel in the past, how I think Richardson-Hitchens kind of didn't like the look of that fight. He wasn't necessarily in the best place with his camp there with the weight cut. And I think he just saw Oscar Duarte and was like, nah, I don't like the pressure. But Oscar Duarte is a very gifted pressure fighter. And like I said, Jaime Munguia making his comeback too, also a very talented power puncher. He suffered I think it was an upset of the year to Bruno Saras a couple of years ago. Maybe it was 2025. But he was upset by a fighter from France named Bruno Saras, and then came back in a rematch and won it by decision. After losing the first fight by knockout. Saras knocked him out in the first fight. Second fight, Munguia comes back, wins by decision, but then fails a performance-enhancing drugs test. So I'm sure there's going to be questions surrounding him. There's always questions surrounding, when somebody is a power puncher. But, I sort of tied it more to the losses, to be honest. I think, you can't really, you can blame a fighter for taking steroids at any point, but, the blame to me is a little lesser after multiple losses, especially with the way the game works. And the fact that Jaime Munguia is actually, a very entertaining and very fun striker, and a very unconventional striker, and just a very interesting fighter to watch. I've always found him to have a very interesting take on the Mexican style and be a very appealing Mexican power puncher. It makes a lot of sense that he's booked on this card with Benavidez. There's clearly a focus of Mexican power punchers on this card. So we'll see how he does. He's fighting Jose Resendez, who I think might be a bit of a stationary target for him, somebody that Munguia will be able to easily land on, somebody who, has fast hands, but I don't think is necessarily going to be able to trouble Munguia too much. Munguia should be able to slow down with power punches the other way and be able to control and win that fight. So I'm going to pick Munguia in that fight. Obviously, I'll definitely pick Duarte in his fight. I think that the A sides are probably going to take care of business. It'll be, like a traditional boxing card, like any promoter like PBC would love. I really don't think that Zurdo is going to overcome Benavidez here. I think it's just he's all wrong for us, to quote Rocky. He's all wrong for Zurdo. Benavidez is all wrong for Zurdo. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this weekend's fight card here from Las Vegas, this Cinco de Mayo card. Let me know what you guys think, and like and subscribe for more combat sports content. I'll be back very soon. I'm going to make another video before Inoue versus Nakatani, and I hope I will have a summary video out for both of these fights as well. So stay tuned for that. Peace out, guys. I'll be back very soon.